and gentlemen, we are going to be interviewing Jason Schreier, acclaimed games journalist and author of Play Nice, The Rise, Fall, and Future of Blizzard Entertainment, a book that I recently read and really enjoyed. Without further ado, let me bring on Jason Schreier. I'm gonna call him right now. I read your book. I really enjoyed it. I worked at Twitch into NVIDIA around a lot of these years when you're covering in the book, and it's so funny seeing what felt like a slow-moving train wreck of Blizzard, things like the Overwatch League, things like all this stuff going wrong. I had no idea the chaos that was going on internally. It was as bad as it looked from the outside.
Man, I mean, it's 33 years of history on Blizzard, so it's not all bad. I should make that clear. To kind of zoom out for a second. So what I did for the book was I interviewed about 350 people, like 300 something of them were actually Blizzard employees. So events like the Diablo Immortal announcement.
Do you guys not have phones?
Yeah, you guys all have phones, right?
And Blitzchung and Warcraft 3 Reforged being a debacle. And so one of the things I did with the book was like bring in all these voices and all these Blizzard people to talk about what happened from their perspective and bring some new inside information.
I wanted to ask you, this is a question that I had in myself, and I was trying to answer it through your book, and I wanted to know what your take on it is, which is when, if you had to pick the year it peaked and started to fall, when did it start? When did Blizzard really, the decline begin? My answer from my own experience and also from reading your book would have been Heroes of the Storm, which is like this first big public failure, which I think is the first time I ever saw as like an outside gamer that I saw, this game is not good enough. It's not Blizzard level. It felt off. Heroes of the Storm was like the first time I saw it fall. But I want to know what your take was, knowing more and knowing what employees say, and when do you think it really felt like, oh, we're not perfect anymore?
Okay, so the question of like when Blizzard, like when its reputation started to be tarnished, that to me is a little bit different than the question of when Blizzard actually started to fall. And to me, when Blizzard actually started to fall is November of 2004, when Blizzard released a game called World of Warcraft.
Oh, interesting.
Leading up until World of Warcraft, Blizzard was this hit machine that released Warcraft, Warcraft 2, Diablo 2, StarCraft, Warcraft 3, etc., like all these games. Every year or every couple years, they released a new box product, and it would come out, and each one would be bigger than the last. Then in 2004, Blizzard releases World of Warcraft, and it is astronomically successful. Like the lead designer and co-founder of the company, Alan Adham, believes that they are going to, like, his wild estimation is like, we're going to reach 1 million subscribers in a year. And instead they reach 5 million subscribers in a year. The company goes from hundreds of people to thousands of people. They suddenly essentially pause development on Diablo 3 and StarCraft 2 because all those people have to start working on World of Warcraft.
Oh yeah, dude. I mean, in your book, you talk about so many times where the higher ups are like, don't work on that, come to WoW. They just kept pulling people off of these projects and saying the money maker is, the money,
And so like we have this situation where like this company, I wrote an article about the for The Atlantic about like the curse of success, and World of Warcraft to me is the kind of the quintessential example of that, of this game that just like turned the company into something else entirely. And for a lot of people it was good. I mean, they were making money, a lot of people, it was lucrative, a lot of people benefited from that, a lot of people enjoyed the game. Obviously World of Warcraft brought so many people together, brought together spouses and like lifelong friends, and like did all these great things. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying it's a bad game. There's a great quote in the book from this guy Sean Carnes, who said, when millions turn into billions, everything changes. And they were able to get out a couple of other incubation projects, and obviously they did come out with StarCraft 2 and Diablo 3 and Hearthstone, but WoW just kind of irreversibly changed the nature of the company. Suddenly it was making games that were not just like one-time releases, but forever games. World of Warcraft, Diablo 4, Overwatch, like Hearthstone, those are all forever games. Those are not games that just kind of like,
I wouldn't call Overwatch a forever game.
You know what I mean, though. You know what I mean. It's a game that just like, you keep churning out stuff for it. So like it's live service games. World of Warcraft really transformed Blizzard into something else entirely. My point here is not to take away from that, like, or take away from the quality of the game, but Blizzard without World of Warcraft would have been on a very different trajectory.
Oh yeah. Speaking of that, again, you tell the whole story of Blizzard being passed around like a hot potato to so many different people that owned the company. But the one everyone knows is Activision, where Activision sort of merged with Blizzard, and they became this juggernaut. And the person they know and perhaps ascribe a lot of the problems to is Bobby Kotick. So Bobby Kotick of Activision becomes like this mythical evil figure that is like the reason Blizzard went wrong. He is the money guy. Is it more complicated than that? How much blame would you put on Bobby Kotick? Is Bobby Kotick a hero or a villain to you, or where does he fall?
In this case, I mean, Bobby Kotick is a fascinating dude to me. I mean, he is, like you mentioned, like growth is his obsession. There's no secret to him. He is not a subtle guy. He is like capitalism personified.
When you saw the Activision people's quotes in these books, it's like, we are selling slop to willing slop eaters. We are like, we don't play the games. We don't care. We could be selling diapers. We could be selling cereal. We're just going to make a product. We need to make another one every year. It's so interesting. They did not hide it at all. I almost respected it.
Eat your slop, Matriarch. Eat your slop.
I almost respected the honesty rather than pretending like they cared about it. It was just funny to me.
Activision merges with Vivendi Games in 2007 to form Activision Blizzard, and it's really interesting because things go well for a few years, but at a certain point it's clear that they're like oil and water in terms of values, because Blizzard is a company that believes very strongly in like developer first, like when it's ready is their mantra. Like, we'll release games when they're ready. And Activision is the complete opposite. Activision is marketing first, commercial org first. Like, we will release Call of Duty every single fall, no matter what. We will release a game every year. Once we identify a hit franchise, Bobby's word is exploit. Like, we will exploit that franchise.
No,
So,
I mean, you
it's
talked about, I
really-
just want to give people examples so they tie it in. You know, Activision was the one who got hold of Tony Hawk and said, we have to put out a 50 new Tony Hawk games in 5 years and run it into the ground. They got a hold of Guitar Hero. You know, Guitar Hero had this big spike of success. And we're like, all right, we need 40 new. Yeah, there was a quote that shocked me in your book. I think it was Bobby Kotick talking to the Guitar Hero team. And they're like, okay, we can get out a new Guitar Hero every year. And he's like, that is way too slow. We need a new one every quarter. We need a new one every 2 weeks. And he wasn't joking. That's crazy.
Yeah.
That's
But like,
crazy.
like if you're an Activision, if you're someone who's an executive at Activision, you look over at Blizzard and you say, okay, great, you guys think games are art, like taking all the time you need. Okay, fantastic. But like, you guys just took 7 years to like incubate a game and nothing has happened from it. So like, who do you think is paying the bills for you while you do that? So like, there's different perspectives on this, and I think that like the real tragedy here, the tragedy of the latter years of Blizzard, at least from a business standpoint, is the inability of both sides to find room in the middle and to find like a spot of compromise. So Activision, essentially, they strong-armed Blizzard into hiring this chief financial officer.
Oh, is this
and they brought in
Zerza?
this Armin Zerza. And Armin Zerza is a guy who came from Procter & Gamble, like soap and diapers and shampoo, and like he knew how to ship products. He eventually becomes chief operating officer of the company. So super powerful at Blizzard. And he's not like, he's clearly like an Activision-minded guy who is bringing that ethos to Blizzard, and that causes all sorts of problems for people internally. And if you ask Blizzard people, they'll all be like, oh, it's Bobby Kotick's fault, we can never find a compromise. And if you ask the Activision people, they'll be like, oh, it's Mike Morhaim's fault, they refuse to listen to us, they refuse to make any compromises. These two extremely strong-willed, like stubborn factions that I feel like really just could not find a way to work together. And of course, just when it seemed like Activision was winning or going to win, California lawsuit hit and shit hit the fan, and soon enough Microsoft was in charge instead. So nobody really won at the end of that whole business battle.
You say there's no heroes and villains, and I think that's a good thing for a journalist to say, and I think that it shows you have both sides in your book. However, reading this, it is so hard not to think of the guy you mentioned, Armin Zerza, as a villain.
With Armin, yeah, he's a character for sure. It's funny, he's like he's got this thick Austrian accent, so like Blizzard employees would joke that he sounded like a James Bond villain, but I think he's more like a Game of Thrones character. I'll leave it to I'll leave it to readers to figure out
backstabbed his way up the ladder. It was just fascinating. I want to push back a little bit. So you said that it's not all bad. And I agree. There's plenty of interesting, good parts of this book. You go through all these different eras of Blizzard from the early days to now with Microsoft acquisition. In my mind, I had this image of Blizzard as like, everything was perfect. It was this group of people that super loved gaming, super passionate. They make these great games from my childhood, Warcraft, Starcraft, and it's all hits and everything's smooth up until about, recently. Then they have some high-profile failure games. They have the lawsuits and things go wrong. And they have But as I read this book, what struck me right off the bat was like how chaotic it was from the very early days. Like you reveal in this book, I didn't know this, they were owned by an educational software company. They changed hands a bunch of times. They would work insane hours to put out StarCraft or Warcraft, and then the game would release, sell millions of copies, and they wouldn't get paid. I'm interested, what was your POV going in? Was it similar to mine? Was this a surprise to you, or how did you?
So it never surprises me to hear a video game company like is secretly turbulent and full of chaos behind the scenes. But like the extent of the details, some of the stories surprised me. The actual nitty gritty of it all surprised me.
Yeah, the guy that wrote the Martian, Andy Weir, he is in this book as a Blizzard employee who was just like totally harassed for not doing crunch.
So he worked on the launcher for the game. He wanted to go away for a weekend. He got a bunch of shit even just for leaving for the weekend, but he also got a bunch of shit because he wasn't like great at it. Blizzard in 1995, when Andy Weir was there, it was this atmosphere where nobody really knew what they were doing.
As I was reading the book, I got so many flashbacks of like the early era of Twitch as it was starting, working inside that as it was blowing up and then Amazon bought it. And there was a part, I underlined a bunch of things in this book and I realized I have no way to find what I underlined, so it doesn't help me at all. I remember the line basically, you said, it was a Blizzard employee basically saying that the only way to rise up at the company was to like go out in Vegas and like party with the higher ups. And I distinctly remember that feeling at Twitch. Like in the early days, there would just be people that were in this kind of bro culture at the top. And if you didn't go out drinking and partying and like gambling, and like there's no way you were getting noticed to get bigger projects or moving up.
Yeah, it's just like a classic tech and gaming thing. And I think like it can suck to be like a dude who doesn't want to participate in that, but it really sucks being a woman because you can't participate in that. For women who work at the company and for women who work at a lot of these male dominated companies, it can be really a struggle. Even if you're not like, some of these companies, including Blizzard, have issues with like blatant sexual harassment and discrimination and misconduct, and that sort of stuff is heinous, obviously. But even more subtly and more systemic and much more common is that idea of like it being this boys club at the very top, and you can't even like there's no path,
there's no avenue in. Yeah, I wanted to zoom out a bit. There's a lot of questions I have about Blizzard, but I was hoping to open a little bit more with, I wanted to get your high level thoughts on the gaming industry as a whole right now, because it's such an interesting time. If you ask some people, they'll say there's layoffs everywhere, it's chaos, the industry is dying or dead, it's a total crapshoot, don't go into it, avoid at all costs. And then you've asked other people, it's like it's never been better, this is like the greatest time in gaming history, we have tons of new games. Like where do you land? What is your POV on the gaming industry in 2024?
Yeah, it's good timing with this crazy Concord news.
I saw
today.
that.
I'm sure you saw that. Man, wild. For people who didn't see, Sony shut down Firewalk Studios, which is the company that made Concord, which is a game that was such a flop that Sony like pulled it from release less than 2 weeks after it came out. As far as like the overall industry, I would say that from a gamer's perspective, I feel like I am constantly like inundated with cool things to play. Right now, I'm like juggling so many cool, like I have Metaphor Refantasia, which I've been spending so many hours in. There's like a sequel to Case of the Golden Idol coming out, which is one of my favorite games. I'm super stoked about that. There are just so many good games to play. Like this year has been full of bangers. From an industry perspective, I cannot imagine ever recommending that like a friend or family member join the video game industry. It just seems so bleak, and one of the reasons for that is this glut of awesome video games, because it's so hard to stand out on the market. There are other problems too. I mean, another problem is that like so many people are, in addition to all of these cool new games that are constantly coming out, are playing the old games like Fortnite, GTA Online.
I mean, they're now decades old, some of these games, and they still have just the insane vice grip on live service. I mean, it feels like, especially devs that are trying to get into live service, have been hit the wall of Fortnite, Counter-Strike, Dota, Valorant, League of Legends, but like these games that are just this ironclad in their top spot for years and years and years and years.
Yeah, it's crazy. So it's like games that come out today don't just have to compete with like the other big games that are coming out on the market like this week, this month, this year, but also the games that came out 5 years ago. Like that was unheard of even a decade ago. And Fortnite especially, Fortnite has really become like the hangout space for a lot of people in like that kind of, I guess, Gen Alpha, like teenage years.
That's an interesting thing you bring up, because it feels like not just Fortnite, but Fortnite and Roblox, maybe Fortnite a little older and Roblox a little younger, but they've become like, I don't know the right word for it, but like meta games where they have these tools where you can remake almost every popular game in them. And so there's no reason for someone to leave Fortnite Fortnite or the Roblox world when they can play 600 new games a day for free in the game itself. I mean, I don't know if you've ever explored some of the stores there, but they have like straight rip duplicates of almost every popular gaming, and it's completely unexplored and undersued, I think, which is crazy. I think they're due for a really big lawsuit.
Yeah, I'm not really sure. Like, if I'm a video game company trying to come out with a new game today, man, marketing is like, I don't know, you tell me, what are the marketing tricks? How do you even get people to notice you?
It's so interesting. I have been thinking about this lately, and what's interesting is from the consumer POV, though, you could argue that it's never been a better time, right? Like, there's so, as you mentioned, there's so much good stuff. I don't know if you're familiar with the story of Lethal Company, that game that came out and really, it sold, I don't know, I think they did 50 million, did crazy. It's a total solo dev. And that guy is a 17-year-old furry who learned everything from being a Roblox dev. He just grew up playing Roblox as a kid. He learned how to be a game dev. He launched his own game, Lethal Company, and it's outperforming AAA games. You know, it feels like this is an era of indie and solo devs kind of striking back because the dev costs have gone down so much. You can use the internet to find an artist, or you can do it all so much cheaper. And so maybe it's just a reshifting away from these big, massive AAA, huge studios because they just can't guarantee the money anymore. You know, it's kind of like Hollywood, what's happening.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that can be a really good thing. You look at a game like Balatro or Animal Well, both were made by a single person, which means they are both super cheap to make compared to these AAA extravaganzas. And as a result, and here's the important part, they can take huge risks. And so, like, a game like Balatro, no AAA game would ever make that. A game like Animal Well, no AAA studio would ever make that. Like, in Animal Well, some of the secrets are impossible to find. Like, some of the secrets will never be found unless you work together with people on a Discord or like look it up or something like that.
Right.
So these are games that like no Ubisoft or EA or Take-Two would ever allow to be published because they're too risky. The people who actually made them don't need to sell 10 million copies to break even. They might just be thrilled with like 50,000 or 100,000 copies. Balatro, there was a chance that nobody would have ever noticed.
Right.
That.
You can get lost in the 50,000 games released a day. You know, Animal Well is an interesting example if we're going to talk about marketing in gaming, because I do think one area is content creators and influencers, and the way Animal Well partnered with Donkey, it does feel like that's something that maybe the studios or the older studios are not adapting to as well as they, I mean, I guess they sort of have in recent years.
So Animal Well, so it's Donkey. Donkey actually, he started a company called Big Mud that actually published Animal Well. So Animal was quite literally, it was published by Donkey's company, not just, it wasn't just like a marketing partnership or something like that, which I thought is brilliant. When Donkey announced that he was going to publish games, I saw a bunch of people, like colleagues, peers, whatever, I saw people criticizing him and be like, what is this like YouTuber know about publishing games? Just because he can criticize games doesn't mean he can publish them. And I tweeted something like, wait until all these people criticizing Donkey, like wait until they find out who's actually in charge of these video game companies, like people who worked at McKinsey for 5 years
they have no,
and then, like
failed their way up.
life.
You made a distinction between marketing and publishing, but it's so interesting, and this is my limited POV. In the modern day, that's like the main thing the publisher is bringing to the table. It's really easy to get set up on Steam and get your game out there so someone can buy it. It can get it all set up, and people aren't buying in stores anymore. You don't need all that logistics. So the publisher is what's bringing you is marketing. That's like their main value prop.
Well, I would say they have other value props. So a publisher, so funding is the biggest one for a lot of companies, for a lot of the either game studios that are like owned by a Ubisoft or an EA, or they have a publishing deal. A lot of times funding is the biggest one. But there's other stuff too. I mean, marketing is a big one for sure, but there's also like PR, which is a part of marketing, but not like it's a very different kind of. But also like stuff like certification, which is when you deal with the console manufacturers and you have to kind of go through their compliance testing to make sure you can actually get your game on PlayStation and Xbox. Or like distribution. If you're a solo indie developer, you might not know anybody at Steam, but like your publisher might have the contact who like knows how to help you out and troubleshoot if something goes wrong on your Steam page. So there's a lot of stuff like that, like kind of nitty-gritty stuff. But
yeah,
yes,
I'm not discounting that. I'm just sort of saying, like, in my experience, we talking to some publishers through some stuff I've been working on, and that stuff feels like it's getting more and more, the word might be commodified. Like it's just, you can pay money, you can get it done, but the one thing you can't do is get someone to care. You can't get attention. Attention's very hard to get on your game. I made a video when Donkey first announced. I really think it's there's a lot of power to it because he unlike many other publishers, can get 1 million people the day of your launch to watch a video showing how great the game is. Like that is a power that is, like, I think underrated by some of these older studios that is becoming more and more obvious.
Yeah, you're 100% right. And I think that, like, the Activisions of the world are still a very old school. I mean, you look at Call of Duty has a pretty strong marketing machine behind it, but a lot of their activations, a lot of their kind of infrastructure is built around TV commercials and a lot of traditional
older stuff,
marketing. And someone like Donkey, I mean, that's incredibly powerful, and it's 100% free, and it's a smart move. And I also think what is really smart about Donkey's approach is that, like, he's a guy who has built his entire brand, his entire career on being honest. And I think if he made a game and tried to show it on his platform, like, it would be so obvious that, like, and he would just lose trust forever. So, like, I think for him it was risky for him because it really had to be
if the game was a stinker, it would have been.
It's funny, there's a lot of parallels between book publishing and video game publishing, and one of them is that, like, in book publishing you really have to the author has to do all the marketing themselves, which is really interesting.
Are you in your 30s?
I'm 37 years old.
Okay, so I'm in my 30s too. You are what I think is extremely rare, which is someone who has survived a very long time in games journalism. Even more than game development, even more than games journalism is, like, an extremely, from my understanding, extremely difficult career to, like, to be a survivor a long time in. And so you've done that. And I would love to know more about your thoughts on that. Like, how did you do that? Why do you think you're an outlier? What has allowed you to survive? Like, you have to go to different platforms. It seems very, very difficult, and you've done it. So I want to know if you have any advice to people that are interested in it. Like, where is your unique attribute that made that possible?
I mean, a lot of it is straight up luck. Like, I'm not even bullshitting you right now. I started my career and I was doing a bunch of freelancing and stuff and worked at Wired for a bit. After I graduated from college, which was 2009, I was doing the freelance grind. And freelancing, especially in games journalism, doesn't make much money.
No.
And the only way I was able to do that is because I got super lucky and found this gig at a website called patch.com, which was like this local journalism website, and they had a gig for a copy editor. And as a copy editor, they would pay you $500 a week to, like, go through 300 retail listings and then just check them for typos and stuff. And because I was a very fast, and still am a very fast reader, I could do this in about 5 hours. That was how I paid my rent and, like,
awesome.
grocery bills while trying to freelance in the games industry. And I swear to God, if I had not gotten that gig, like, lucked out into getting that gig, I would probably not be in this career. I would have had to get an office job or something, because freelancing alone, I would not have been able to pay the bills. So, like, when I talk about luck, like, I got so lucky even just finding that. But you need to write the book on Twitch. That's what I want.
Dude, you should. There was one part that I think
not
in
me,
your book.
You need to.
Oh, I know. I'm a Twitch streamer. I'm illiterate, so there's no possible way I could write a full paragraph, let alone. There was one part that you didn't include, and again, I can't even 100% confirm this, so I just want to talk about it. To me, the most fascinating tale of this whole, the part that I was most personally invested in, coming from an esports background, was the Overwatch League. And you cover a lot of the hilarious highs and lows in this. The one part that I didn't know was that they were going to charge $250,000 for to have an Overwatch League team. And Bobby Kotick comes in and says 20x that or whatever, make it 20 million. He said, make it 20 million because then we'll attract the real big fish. And it worked. And so all these big sports guys who don't know absolute shit about esports, they don't know anything, they don't know, they just see the graphs, and they spend 20 million to get, you know, a team in this league that is kind of doomed from the start. It's not that fun to watch. To me, that's so fascinating, had so many long-running effects. But one thing you didn't mention, you have kind of one line about it, which is that in the first season, they got this Twitch deal for the rights, for the streaming rights. And everyone involved is like, oh, it's kind of happy. We got $100 million deal. It's going to get bigger from here. But the story of that deal, from my knowledge internally, is so dramatic. Bobby Kotick came down to Twitch and basically said, we're going to pull the rights to every Blizzard game from Twitch. You won't be able to have Warcraft or Starcraft or anything if you don't give us a good deal on the Overwatch League. That was my understanding, is that he played insane hardball to try and get Twitch to bend over. Because if you really think about it, there was absolutely no reason for Twitch to spend that money. And it had so many negative effects in Twitch for years. Like all their content budget was slashed. It was a big disaster. They didn't make any money back on it. And if you think about it, like if Twitch said no, what the hell is Bobby Kotick going to do with all these people he promised viewership numbers and like at the time you couldn't stream anywhere else. What, they were going to put it on MLG or like, he's a good deal maker is what I'll say, because he had no leverage, I think.
So I hadn't heard that story. Where I thought you were going with this was the Twitch to YouTube like switch when Overwatch League gave up on Twitch and made a deal with YouTube, which itself just kind of debilitated the Overwatch League.
Oh yeah. So yeah, they went to YouTube. I don't know what the YouTube deal was, but I assume it had to be smaller. I don't know. I mean,
it was a bigger deal from what I remember. This is me speaking off the cuff, so I would have to really check.
No, don't worry.
But from what I remember, the YouTube deal was bigger, and that's why Blizzard moved to YouTube as opposed to the Twitch deal, and for the guaranteed money, knowing that it would be a huge hit in actual viewership.
Another story I would love to see you take a look at is, you know, League of Legends is a very successful esport. The World's Championship Series is going on right now. It gets millions of views, doing very well, and Valorant's doing really well. There's some benefit there. Like, their audience is still there, even if there's a lot of drama and layoffs and financial problems in esports. But what is so interesting is the rise of people like, I don't know if you've heard of them, but like Tarek and Kadril, who are streamers who have become so powerful viewership-wise that they have become where all of these esports are watched. So Riot is putting on this, they have hundreds of employees and all of this multi-million-dollar budget, putting on a broadcast that is for the benefit of this of this one guy in his room. His viewership numbers are bigger than the main channel.
Wild.
It's
That's
really
crazy.
fascinating. And first they fought against it, and now they are just like, he has to watch the ads now because that's he can still sell to their sponsors. But like Riot is leaning into it because it is the way media is being consumed is changing. They don't want the actual broadcasters. They want the off the cuff guy in his bit. It's fascinating. I mean, to me, it is like such a change, and it might bleed over to real sports. I mean, I could see this.
Well, have you seen, are you a football guy? Because like there's the Manning cast, which is basically that.
I've heard of this. So like
on Monday Night Football, there's like the normal like ESPN kind of traditional view, and then a lot of people watch this kind of like alternate broadcast where it's Peyton and Eli Manning who are just like chatting and making jokes and like bringing on silly guests for like amateur hour conversations.
Oh man, okay. Speaking of esports, I wanted to talk to you just a little bit because I thought, to me, this is so fascinating, was the battle between Kespa and Blizzard over in Korea. Now, for chat's catching up, Korea started the esports leagues around StarCraft 1, and it was kind of off of Blizzard's radar, and it became massive, and they had these big, huge stadium things well before esports got big in the West, and they were way ahead of the game. And I used to watch those. Then when StarCraft 2 comes out, Blizzard's like, hey, we should own all this. Like, we should be the big dog in this room. You don't have the problem.
Yeah, to be fair to Blizzard, I think their rationale here was not about the finances, because it's not like Kespa was like bringing in the big bucks on StarCraft esports. It was more about the copyright. And so like what had happened already is that like in South Korea, they found that they were unable to trademark BattleNet because people used BattleNet to refer to just like online gaming generally, kind of like the way you would refer to a Band-Aid, like to refer to one of those kind of. So they were really worried about losing the copyright and trademark to their games, to StarCraft, and they were worried that it would set this precedent if they like allowed people to use their games without them being involved. And so that was a big part of their kind of perspective on this battle. But meanwhile, Kespa was like, what the hell are you doing? Like, we've been doing this esports stuff just fine without you. Like, we don't need you. Like, you've allowed us to do this for so long without paying attention to us. Like,
I want to ask, I guess probably the biggest question for right now. What is your POV on how this Activision Blizzard Microsoft buyout has gone?
I think it's too soon to tell. It's only been a year as far as the long-term ramifications. Obviously, in the short term, it's been a debacle. It's been a disaster almost immediately. So in October, I paint this picture towards the end of the book, but in October of last year, Blizzard people were so happy and so excited. Like, they were lining up for selfies with Phil Spencer, who like came to visit them on campus. They were really so stoked about like getting they had completely lost faith in Activision, to the point where after the lawsuit and all the sexual misconduct allegations came out, about 2,000 people all across Activision Blizzard like signed this petition calling for Bobby Kotick to be ousted, and they used their real names, which is crazy. Like 2,000 people who worked for Bobby Kotick all put their real names on a petition trying to kick him out. So they had lost faith. And so like this idea of Microsoft coming in and clearing house on the Activision C-suite and changing things up culturally, I think that was really promising to people. And then it took about 3 months before they laid off 1,900 people all across Xbox, including like hundreds at Activision.
I think it's awesome that they did that and they signed the thing to get him out and they put their real names, and I think that's powerful. But he walked away with such a payout. From my POV, from an outsider POV, it doesn't look like we're cleansing Bobby Kotick from the system to make the studio better. It feels like he is finding the one avenue where he walks away scot-free with a huge, massive golden parachute.
Yeah, well, so to be clear about that, it wasn't like that Microsoft like paid him to go away. It's that he owned a substantial amount of Activision Blizzard stock, and so like everybody who owned, the way the deal worked is Microsoft paid $95 per share for Activision Blizzard stock, and so anyone who owned, if you owned a single share of Activision Blizzard, you got $95. Bobby Kotick owned millions of shares, and so he got a significant amount of money because of that.
Right, but
like
but had the FTC blocked the merger, that stock would have continued. I mean, we think it would have continued to slide.
I mean, who knows? Anything can happen. Like with a publicly traded company, I mean, anything can potentially happen. But like that money, it's not like he like got a check for like being such a great guy as partner on this deal.
Sure. Yeah, that's fair. I think there's a different way of looking at it, which is that he ran a publicly traded company into the ground, essentially, and the stock was nosediving, and then Microsoft provided a bailout that shot the value of those shares that he owned back up.
Yeah, that's true. Yes, it wasn't, I wouldn't say it was nosediving. It was hovering around $60, $65, $70 a share. Microsoft bought it for $95 a share. It had previously hit a high of like around 100, 105, something like that. But of course, Bobby Kotick, I mean, he ran the company for 30 years. He took it from out of bankruptcy, like it was trading for nothing, and grew it significantly. And for all of his flaws, some of which are documented in Play Nice, The Rise, Fall, and Future of Blizzard Entertainment, the one thing that is undeniable is that he was the CEO of this company that was remarkably successful, that grew at an astonishing rate.
Yeah, I guess it just felt unfair. You know, I'll be honest with you, just from the outside, it just felt like Blizzard senior management was getting away with it almost. Like they had done such a poor job in recent years, and they were getting away with not receiving any even financial punishment. You know, like nothing was going wrong for them. That was what it felt like from the outside, but there could be some upside. Oh, here's one. Did the editing process of the book ever mean you lost elements you wish you kept? Did you have to cut anything? Any secret stories that got cut?
I wouldn't say that I wish I kept them, because I actually think that so I worked with an editor at Hachette, Jackie Young, who is really fantastic, and she was really good at trimming the fat of this book. The original draft of the book was like 130,000 words, and then we cut it down to like 106,000, and a lot of that stuff was like granular development details, because one of my goals of Play Nice, The Rise, Fall, and Future of Blizzard Entertainment was to make it appealing to like even just kind of standard business book readers who even people who haven't played games or like don't know Blizzard or don't care about Blizzard. And so I wanted to cut out some stuff about like inside of StarCraft's development or whatever, or like Diablo 2's 1.10 patch. I had a whole bunch of stuff about that. I was like, okay, we can get that. I'm very happy with the final product. Like I don't really feel regretful about any big cuts.
It was glaring. Like the part where you didn't include the 1.10 patch, I couldn't even get through it. I was like,
are you a Diablo 2 fan? I didn't notice. So 1.10, I mean, like people who actually played Diablo 2 back in the day will be like, oh, 1.10. Well, because it's not like that's not just a random number. That was like this infamous patch that was like in development for 2 years and people had been waiting for a long time. And basically, short version of the story is I found out it was entirely developed by a single original guy, this guy
Oh.
Peter Yu, who completely overhauled all of Diablo 2 over the course of 2 years. And then the crazy part is you can read more about what happened behind the scenes at Blizzard North, which was the maker of
Yes,
Diablo,
yeah.
in the book. But what happened was this guy Peter Yu, he was like in the process of finishing it, and then all the founders left, and he wanted to go with them, but he stayed behind to finish working on this patch. So it was craziness. It was batshit
Can I
insane. Go
ask
check
you-
out the book if you're curious.
Okay,
about
so
this.
based on what I know from your book, Peter Yu didn't get paid very much for doing that. They did not. Because the whole
man.
first third of this book is like, this guy worked heroically through the night and ate 14 pizzas and slept under his desk to get out this Warcraft 3 or StarCraft patch or whatever. And then the game launches, sells 4 million copies. It's amazing. And then nobody gets paid. Like, nobody gets... It's like...
It's true. It's
like,
true.
there was
no.
little profit
Well,
sharing.
okay, to be fair, yes, nobody gets paid. A bunch of people leave. Those people who stayed behind get paid because
Yeah, okay, yeah,
Blizzard
people
suddenly
leave to
feels
protest,
bad.
and then the people that stay behind get like, okay,
Yeah,
well,
yeah.
we don't want you to leave, so...
Yeah, so we're gonna pay you.
It's really,
yeah.
it's frustrating. It was frustrating to read those parts because it happened again and again until I think World of Warcraft, where they had so much money, people started getting paid, at least for the WoW guys.
Yep,
But-
yeah, at least for the first few years, yeah, and at least people on the game dev side of things as opposed to like customer
Right.
service.
You know, I'm a Twitch streamer, YouTube creator, and it's an online gaming mail space. And I have seen this rise of, you know, you've talked about it with the Concourse, this rise of like everything is so woke, not that statement, but that ethos from like people in these communities where it's like they're mad. They're just a rise of anger among this space. You know, we make fun of it on this stream, but it is a real thing that I'm noticing where it's people who are making their whole identity around being angry at video. I mean, a great example, I saw you tweet about this. It was about Sweet Baby Inc. and people assuming this is some Machiavellian, ultimate powerful company reaching in to ruin your games. Like, I've worked with them at NVIDIA. It's like such a small group of consultants that you use when you're desperate. It's like when your stuff is over budget and over time, you pull in Sweet Baby Inc. at a last second. Maybe you've seen it forever, but for me, it feels more recent.
Yeah, there's a lot of it's a complicated subject because a lot of it is tied to this kind of larger scale culture war in the world and in America, and a lot of like the word woke. I mean, my grandmother used the word woke in a conversation with me the other day. Like I was just like, what is going on here? So it's very complicated, but I will say that it feels like there's this really big backlash to even the idea of diversity in games, but it also doesn't really feel consistent because when a game is good, see Baldur's Gate 3, but it has diversity, then it's okay, I guess, because it's a good game. Because I guess you can choose not to play as a woman if you want. People use the term like forced diversity, which is so stupid. It just, none of it makes sense. Like, what is forced diversity? Is it like when you go outside and you have to cover your eyes every time you see a black person? Like, what? Like, just none of it makes any sense to me. I guess when I'm trying to empathize with what some of these people are trying to say or articulate, it's kind of like, I understand if you see something and you feel like it's clunky in some way. Like if a game tries to handle, I don't know, transgender issues and it comes off to you as clunky, in which case your real issue there is with bad writing. And if you like see a game and you're like, this game sucks because it has transgender people in it, then you're just a shitty person, man. But
Yeah,
look,
I
at the
think
end
it's
of the
just
day,
sad to me because it poisons the well on a lot of, you know, I really enjoy talking about games. I enjoy criticizing games. Like for me, making fun of Concord is hilarious. Obviously, a high profile studio dumping $100 million to make a hero shooter is so dumb that it's funny to make fun of. It is just, it's visually fun. But I hate having to fall in with people that are like, the reason it failed is because it's so woke. You know, it's annoying that gets every single time I want to talk about games business, someone brings that in. I find it to be frustrating. Oh, you know what? This is a high level question. You've probably been asked it a bunch, but I do think it's a good one. What made you want to do that? What made you want to write this? Like, why of all the things you could have written about in gaming, why pick Blizzard? Why, especially if you're not getting paid, you know, if it's not like a huge moneymaker, what made it worth all the effort?
Money is not like a super high priority to me. My biggest motivating factor is like to do stuff that I'm super proud of, that like really resonates with people and like entertains them and informs them, and that just like really, I find it really satisfying and rewarding when I write something that goes out into the world and people read it and really enjoy it. For this book specifically, specifically, so as I was finishing up my last book, Press Reset, I started thinking about like what I wanted to do next, and I kept thinking back to what I had started hearing about in 2018, which was this kind of corporate takeover of Blizzard by Activision. And I kept thinking about that tension and how I had heard that tension is essentially what led to Blizzard's CEO and co-founder Mike Morhaime leaving Blizzard, which I thought was another just kind of like an interesting tension point. And so I started the book with that in mind, also knowing that Blizzard is one of the most fascinating companies in gaming just because of all the hit games it's made and all the years of history it had. So I felt like there was ample territory there. And then from there, like all these crazy things happened. Like I started working on this book a year before Microsoft ever entered the picture. And then Microsoft came in and bought Blizzard. It was really the Activision corporate takeover that made me feel like this was the book to write.
Jason,
man,
I have taken up enough of your time. I really appreciate you coming on. This was awesome. If you ever want to talk about anything again, we're always open. We'd love to have you. We talk about all sorts of games business stuff on here, and you have a huge wealth of knowledge that the chat really enjoyed.
Sure. Hit me up anytime. This is a lot of fun. Thanks, Asia. Appreciate it. And yeah, everyone check out Play Nice, The Rise, Fall, and Future of Blizzard Entertainment. I think it's a pretty cool book. And also, I got to give a quick shout out to my buddies. Come check out Triple Click. It's a podcast I do with my former Kotaku colleagues, Kirk Hamilton and Maddie Myers. And the reason I want to shout it out especially is because like we just launched this super cool thing where we do this one-shot 3-part D&D campaign. We were like, okay, cool, like that sounds fun. We've never really done anything like this. Let's check it out. Who should we get to DM? Well, hey, if we're gonna get someone to DM us, why don't we get the best DM in the world? So we called up Matthew Mercer and got him to come be our dungeon master.
You just launched a paid D&D podcast with Matt Mercer. So the next time I interview you, you are going to be on a yacht.